Revisiting the New York Giants' decision to decline Daniel Jones's option year, the pros and the cons as they get ready for a busy offseason. That and more coming up next on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by Ultimate Football GM. Ever dream of becoming an NFL GM and managing your own football franchise? Then this game is definitely for you. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up in the app stores. Our listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code Locked On. That's in all caps. Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On podcast family, your team every day. Patricia Trainer here with you. And on today's program, I'm actually taking a listener question, and which inspired me. I've gotten some really good listener questions. This one actually was submitted by a few people. And I'm just going to build a whole show around this particular question because I think it's a really good one. And the question is in retrospect, did the Giants make a mistake by not exercising the option year in Daniel Jones's rookie contract? I'm going to give you the pros and the cons, and then I'm going to give you my answer. So that's going to be today's show. And then at the end of the show, I have another listener question, which is related to the topic of Daniel Jones. So that'll be in segment 3 for you. I hope you'll stick around for that. Thank you again for tuning in to the Locked On Giants podcast. Let's get started. Okay, the question as received by several people is, in looking back, did the Giants' decision to decline Daniel Jones's option year come back to bite them? All right, so let's look at some of the facts here. Number one, had the Giants picked up his option year, it would have cost them $22.4 million against this year's cap, the 2023 cap. It also would have freed up the franchise tag for use on Saquon Barkley. It also would have freed up the franchise tag for use on running back Saquon Barkley, who, if you believe reports, is not close to a deal with the Giants. The Giants reportedly offering Saquon about $12.5 to $13 million APY. Barkley's camp reportedly seeking about $16 million APY. Not close, if that report is true. All right, so did the Giants err in their judgment to not pick up Jones's contract? Now, some of you will say, yeah, he was in the first year of this system of Dable and Mike Kafka, and who knew what he was going to do, and so on and so forth. All right, that was a big reason, actually. All right. Actually, let me backtrack a little further. If you remember, Daniel Jones was coming off a season-ending neck injury. He was not publicly cleared at any rate. It was not revealed that he was cleared for contact until early June. So that being said, if the deadline to exercise the option year in his rookie deal was the first week of May, and he supposedly wasn't cleared for contact, right there is good enough reason for the Giants to justify not picking up that option year. Okay, because if you don't know if the guy's going to be better or be able to play again, you're not going to, once you exercise that option year, you are now on the hook for a guaranteed $22.4 million. And the Giants, who last year, remember, were hamstrung in the salary cap, they just weren't going to do that. No way. It didn't make sense. So they declined the option. Now, here, of course, is the fallout from that decision. Jones got healthy, which, good for him. Nobody wants to see a guy have his career end early due to an injury or, not be able to perform. And there was some question, could Brian Dable fix him? We all know that Jones, for the first 3 years of his career, was a turnover machine. We all know that there were decisions that he would make out there that just left you scratching your head saying, dude, what are you doing? There was a lot to doubt about Daniel Jones. And although Brian Dable had a reputation as having fixed Josh Allen of the Bills, it took him a couple of years really to do it, if you think about it. So the question from the Giants' perspective is, okay, we think we got the right coach in Brian Dable to fix Daniel Jones. How quickly, though, can he fix this guy? Is it going to take one season? Is it going to take 2 seasons? Is it going to take 3 seasons? Well, we found out it took 1 season to get him on the right track. And again, there are still things he's not doing that he needs to be able to show that he could do before you can consider him a real, a legitimate upper echelon quarterback. But it's a start. So all those things, and then you throw in the fact that it was a brand new system. Nobody knew how he was going to perform in this system. There was just a lot of questions. So the decision to decline the 5th-year option for the quarterback, who's probably your most important player on the team, and the player who's probably going to get the biggest, guaranteed payout, can't really fault Joe Schoen and the Giants based on those items. Now, the other side of the argument, as I mentioned, had the Giants done that, they would have had Jones under contract for $22 million this year, $10 million less than what it is probably going to cost them to sign him to a new contract. Because again, I'm thinking he's going to get anywhere between 32 and 35 million APY. So that's 10 million now that they don't have for other positions, which quite honestly is not a big deal because I don't get the impression Joe Schoen's going to go crazy in free agency anyway. If anything, he's going to look to re-sign some of his own talent, but more on that in another show. So the decision, obviously, now, if Jones does not get a deal done before March 7th, which is the deadline to apply the franchise tag, now they don't have it for Saquon Barkley. Is that the end of the world if they have to franchise Daniel Jones and not Saquon Barkley? Well, depends on how you look at it, folks. If they have to franchise Daniel Jones, it'll cost them $32 million versus the $10 million it would cost to franchise Saquon Barkley. So that's about a $20 million difference. The thing is once the team applies the franchise tag, that's it. Meaning that if Daniel Jones on March 8th agrees to terms on a new deal, the Giants can't get that franchise back and use it on Saquon. All right. So that's a risk, obviously. The other thing is that, the franchise tag is typically used as a placeholder, as a way to discourage teams from coming in and trying to negotiate with your top free agent. All right. Now, to be clear, there's non-exclusive and exclusive for the franchise tag. Non-exclusive means that a team can come in and negotiate with the player, but if it signs him, then that team better be ready to give up 2 first-round picks. The exclusive means hands off. He can't even come in and he can't even negotiate with the guy. And that tag is usually a little bit more. I don't know off the top of my head what it is for a quarterback, but I can tell you it's way more than 32 million because it's calculated differently than the non-exclusive tag. All right. So what else in terms of the argument? Jones, is this going to cost them? When we talk about APY, and I mentioned, okay, I think Jones's new deal is going to be anywhere between 32 and 35 APY. That doesn't necessarily mean that the Giants are not going to have money to do other things. Because, you look at what the Giants have in cap space. I think they have about 41. So some of you are like, well, Pat, if they have like 41 in cap space, how can they afford, Daniel Jones if he's going to average 30, upwards of 35? How would that work? The answer is simple, folks. The Giants will structure the contract in such, okay, first off, let me backtrack a little bit. The APY is average per year. So if a guy signs a 5-year contract worth $20 million, that comes out to what, $4 million a year? But that $4 million can be structured differently with incentives, with bonuses, with guarantees, all kinds of stuff. So it's not a true cash payout. And usually with a contract, the first year is always going to be low anyway. So the reason for that is because the player signs and gets a signing bonus. So that's cash in the player's pocket just for putting his John Hancock on the dotted line. So that's why a lot of times you look at contracts and you see the first year is so ridiculously low that the player, it's like, okay, his cap hit isn't what, it's nowhere close to the 32 or 35 APY that people were projecting. That's why. It's due to the first year being low. And the way teams do it is they structure different contracts of players who are coming up for renewal in such a way so that you always have somebody on the first year of a deal so that he's not chewing into the cap. So that's an advantage that the Giants have. And, for concerns that if they sign Daniel Jones to a deal worth 35 million APY, put those out of your mind. All right. With that all being said, did the Giants err in not exercising Daniel Jones's option year of his rookie contract? I'm going to answer that in the next segment. Hey, Giant fans, have you ever dreamed of becoming an NFL GM and managing your own football franchise? Well, now your dream can come true with Ultimate Football GM. You'll manage every strategic aspect of your team, play through the seasons, and lead your team to glory, trying to build a dynasty. You'll decide on hiring the right coaches and coordinators, trades, free agents, and the draft. And best of all, you'll do all of this in a realistic game world that is free and completely playable offline, where you can compete against your friends. You can play on the go as you want and when you want. We've created a Locked On League for you to compete against Locked On fans all over the world. Can you be the ultimate Locked On Football GM? Choose the Locked On League in the app and join us. And right now, Locked On Giants listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code Locked On. That's in all caps, by the way, in the game store when you sign up for an account. Again, that code in all caps is Locked On. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up in the app stores. That's ultimate-gm.com. Ultimate Football GM. Start your dynasty today. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm Patricia Trainer, your host, and we're revisiting the Giants' decision to decline Daniel Jones's option year of his rookie deal, a decision that now potentially will cost them anywhere between 10 and 15 million more than what they would have paid had they picked it up. And looking back, if you're the Giants, do you regret not picking up the option year? I don't think they do. Money aside, for the reasons that I mentioned why they declined the option year. The uncertainty about the injury, the uncertainty about how well he would take to Brian Daboll's system and coaching. There was just too many unknown factors for the Giants to sit there and say, okay, we are going to guarantee this guy $22 million in 2023. What if Daniel hadn't worked out? They would have been on the hook for $22 million. So you deduct that from the $44.709 million in effective cap space they have. That would have cut it in half. So you just can't do that. They were better off declining the deal, which they did, and just working towards a new contract where they could get that first year low so that this way they're not cutting into their effective cap space. So pretty much, folks, no brainer as far as I'm concerned. Giants made the right decision. Now, some of you will say, well, the good news is the Giants can get away from Daniel Jones if they want to. Folks, I don't see that happening. I know there are people out there that still feel that the Giants should move on. Derek Carr was released by the Raiders. He's out there. Aaron Rodgers is reportedly going to be traded or is on the trade block. You're going to have movement. Jimmy Garoppolo is not going to be back in Frisco. So a lot of you have said, well, Pat, there are options. The Giants have options. All right. Those options, folks, are probably going to cost more than what it's going to cost to bring back Daniel Jones. With a contract for Daniel Jones, I mentioned like a 5-year deal with an option year in year 4, an option bonus. I'm sorry, I keep saying option year. It should be an option bonus, which if they decline, they are pretty much off the hook. All they have to deal with is the dead money in years from this prorated signing bonus in years 4 and 5. So it works out. And I'll explain that when I do the salary cap show. So from a cost perspective, the Giants can make this work. And as far as moving on, it'll probably cost more to bring in a Derek Carr. It'll probably cost more to bring in a Jimmy Garoppolo. Aaron Rodgers, forget it. Giants I don't think they have the cap space to bring him in, as well as maybe address some of their needs in free agency, where the veteran class might be better than the draft class. So Aaron Rodgers isn't even an option as far as I'm concerned. What about the draft? Giants are drafting 25th. They're not getting a blue chip quarterback at 25. And I know some of you are saying, well, they could trade up. The Chiefs traded up for Mahomes. Chiefs also had more of a complete roster than the Giants did. All right. If the Giants didn't trade last year for a receiver when they were on the cusp of potentially making the playoffs to shore up their receiver core, what on earth makes anybody think that they would contemplate trading up to get a quarterback? You'd have to get into the top 10 to get a quarterback. And that's going to cost you a small king's ransom. Giants aren't doing that. Joe Schoen has shown that he will hold his water when it comes to making trades, that those draft picks are valuable. And for a team that has so many needs right now, linebacker, cornerback, receiver, interior defensive line, interior offensive line, you can't be giving away draft picks for a quarterback when you got a guy who is coming off of a decent season, who has shown promise to turn into something even better. It's just not the way to build a franchise. And just, again, to go back to Saquon Barkley, because I know there are a lot of people who feel the Giants, they've got to have Saquon back. What round was Isaiah Pacheco of the Kansas City Chiefs drafted in? Does anybody know? I'll give you a second. I'll give you a hint. He wasn't a first-round draft pick. He wasn't a second round or a day 2 draft pick. Isaiah Pacheco was drafted in the 7th round of the 2022 draft. Now, why do I mention that? Because Isaiah Pacheco for the Kansas City Chiefs was their leading rusher during the regular season. 830 yards on 170 carries. He was also their leading rusher in the postseason, 197 yards on 37 carries. My point, Saquon is a great talent. I would not be unhappy if they brought him back. But if for some reason they decided to move off of him, I wouldn't be as broken up. Because if you do your scouting homework and you explore all your options, you could probably find decent talent in day 2 or day 3 at the running back position. And Isaiah Pacheco is one example. Ahmad Bradshaw from a few years ago, from back in 2007, he was a 7th round draft pick. And he turned out to have a 1,000-yard season, paired up with Brandon Jacobs for a nice 1-2 punch. So Saquon, a very good talent. Don't get me wrong. But if they have to move off of him, not the end of the world, I don't think. You might agree, you might disagree. I don't think it's the end of the world if they have to move off of him. But here's the bottom line, folks. This is what I think is going to happen. I do think the Giants are going to get Daniel Jones done before the March 7th deadline. I would be surprised if that doesn't happen, right? And if they do, Saquon gets the franchise tag at $10 million, which will end up costing him as much as $3 million if reports about him wanting, or if reports about the Giants having offered him a deal worth $13 million per year are accurate. So Daniel gets done first, in my opinion, then Saquon. And if Saquon decides to play hardball, you move off. Not the end of the world, especially considering the Giants didn't use Saquon all that much as a receiver that I think most people thought they would. And, one last point I'll make on the topic before we take a break. A quarterback, a running back, only as good as the offensive line in front of them. So you need a good quarterback, obviously, because he's touching the ball every snap. But as far as Saquon goes, if you have a good offensive line that can run block, what's to say that, bringing back Matt Breida or promoting Jashawn Corbin or, Gary Brightwell, giving him more touches. What's to say that they can't, be productive? Will they be as productive as Saquon? Maybe not. But, for Giants offense that kind of, features a different guy depending on the opponent, is it really a big deal at the end of the day? So get the quarterback done, plain and simple. All right, coming up next, we're going to answer a listener question, ironically, on the topic of Daniel Jones. Don't go anywhere. Hey, Giant fans, the NFL season might be over, but the NBA season is in full swing. And now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 if their first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores to the spread and more. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/locked-on. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Trainer, and it is now time for our listener mailbag segment of the podcast, where each show I'm going to try and answer at least one question that's submitted by our listeners, because, in the off season, we just don't have enough questions that come in to do a full, Twitter Tuesday, Twitter Thursday. So I'm trying to answer the questions as they come in. And if you want to get a question in, you can either tweet it to me with the hashtag AskPTrain. Again, my Twitter handle is at Patricia_Trainer. You can send it to me on Instagram, preferably on my personal Instagram account, which is at Patty Trainer, PATTITRAINA. Or you can email it to us at lockedongiantspodcast@gmail.com. And that information is in the show notes. All right. So today's question comes from Rich G. And he writes the following. It seems that for a team to be a real Super Bowl contender, the team needs an elite level quarterback. I believe that Daniel Jones' ceiling level is at most the high end of a good quarterback category. If you agree, and given that Jones will not be playing on a rookie contract, aren't the Giants facing a huge hurdle in reaching the Super Bowl competitive level in the foreseeable future? Perhaps in looking at the long term, the Giants would have been better off if Jones did poorly. They drafted higher and they could move on. All right, Rich, thank you for the question. First off, I can never sit here and agree that the Giants would have been better off if Jones or any player would have done poorly. I mean, I just don't get that logic. I don't understand that thinking. I don't understand why anybody would even, why that thought would even cross anybody's mind. I mean, if you're a Giant fan, wouldn't you want the team to do well? So, I mean, I just don't understand why that even comes up. All right. But to your question, do I agree that Jones is on the high end of the good quarterback category? Right now, do I think he is a top 10 quarterback? No. Do I think he's in the top 15 of the quarterbacks in the league? Yes. Do I think he has the potential to move up? Yes. Now, that's all contingent, obviously, in what he does in year two, because there's obviously some things he has to do to take that next step forward. So, right now, I'm optimistic. I think they finally got a system that fits him. They finally got coaches that know his strengths and have put him into the right position to succeed. And it helps that Kafka is coming back for another season. So I'm optimistic. Now, regarding the contract, I'll be honest with you, Rich. I think that's a little overblown, if I'm being honest with you. Now, I understand everybody's like, okay, ideally, you want to know what you have. You want to win a championship with your quarterback on his rookie deal. Was Eli Manning on his rookie deal the second time they won the Super Bowl? Wasn't. He was established, and there's some arguing. It's debatable as to whether Eli was top 5 at the time. All right. So I don't necessarily buy that. I think, because people see Joe Burrow, was on his rookie deal. Josh Allen, the first time I think they went to the playoffs was on his rookie deal. I think that's what people see. And they say, okay, let the quarterback prove himself. But here's the reality of the situation, Rich. The Giants wasted the first 3 years of Daniel Jones's career, plain and simple. And now, yes, they have to pay the piper, but the contract can be constructed in such a way where it's not going to chew up a lot of cap space. And by that, I mean, I'm estimating Daniel Jones will get possibly a 4 to 5 year deal. I'm going to say a 5-year deal with an option year, an option bonus in year number 4. That if the Giants decide not to exercise, they can get out of the deal in 3 years. And I'll explain more of that when I do my salary cap show that's coming up. But here's the other thing you have to remember, Rich. Yes, the quarterback is important, but you also need a good offensive line. You also need a good defense. You need talent everywhere. A good quarterback alone won't get it done by himself. I don't know how old you are, Rich, but if you go back to, the 80s, Archie Manning was a pretty good quarterback, but he played on some really bad teams. All right. So, you can make that argument that, having a good quarterback will make the difference. But if you have a good quarterback and you don't have a good offensive line, what's the good? So no, I don't agree with that thinking at all. I really don't. I don't think that the Giants are facing as huge of a hurdle to get to Super Bowl quality. Do they need to upgrade the roster? Absolutely. They have some significant holes, but I don't think the Giants are going to necessarily be hamstrung by Daniel Jones. I really don't. So long as he continues to develop. Now, there are things obviously that he needs to improve in year 2 of this system. More deep down the field passing, more work from the pocket, more success from the pocket. Just a couple of things that come to mind. But I think he has the support system and the system, the offensive system around him to make a go of this. And look, after the year he had, I'm optimistic. If he stays healthy, why not? Why couldn't he possibly crack into the top 10 of quarterbacks league-wide? He's never going to be top 5, I don't think. But, if he could get it into the bottom of the top 10, why not? So we'll see how it goes. But I don't buy, I don't agree with your sentiments as expressed in your question, though I do appreciate you sending the question in, Rich, always. All right, Giant fans, that's going to do it for us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. Make sure you tune in tomorrow. And as we continue to bring you content 5 days a week. And before I forget, looks like the salary cap show is probably going to be next week. simply because I need to get my materials ready. But I may do a precursor to that live salary cap show. So stay tuned. I'll let you know as I finalize schedules. Thanks so much for making the Locked On Giants podcast your first listen of the day, or if watching on YouTube, your first watch of the day. I'm Patricia Trainer. We will see you tomorrow, Giant fans.